Hey guys, I'm gonna give people a minute to arrive. Just dropped my phone, and uh, yeah, there are a few things I want to talk about from day 2 of the trial. It's gonna get probably a little steamy, but anyway, I will just give people a couple minutes to arrive, and then we'll jump in. Mm. So I normally I kind of go in chronological order, but um, well, maybe I will. Okay, so Captain Keller, he was a captain with Chandler Fire Department, and um, and one thing that he said that was interesting, like I said, I'm not approaching this as a reporter. I'm going to share the details that I found interesting. Hey guys, welcome. Uh, and and sorry about my sweaty appearance. I had to fit in a run before I went live. So, that's probably how it's going to be. Like every night, I'll basically have enough time to grab something to eat, go for a run, or go to the gym, and then go live. But hey. Um, okay, so kicking off with Captain Keller, one thing that he said that I thought was interesting was he said that he overheard Lori talking about the pool party. And first, I have to say, like, normally when I do these lives, I go back through the video, I pull out clips, I verify everything. I just don't have the time to do that with this trial. Not and like get anything else done. But he said something to the effect of he overheard Lori talking about the pool party and someone not getting an invitation because of all of the commotion. So I thought that that was interesting because we know that she had a pool party the night Charles was shot. So he was shot in the morning, and then by that evening, she had a pool party. And according to a neighbor who was interviewed, and I mentioned this last night, it was a pretty raucous pool party, like loud music, and she could hear quite a few people, and the neighbors found it concerning because earlier that day it was a crime scene, so, and they were so new to the neighborhood. I'm sure they were, neighbors had to be thinking, what did the Clampets, when did they arrive in this neighborhood? But anyway, but like, I don't know how much to put on that, but I just thought it was interesting. Um, so another detail, and I'm going to kind of end with the one that I found the most concerning. And day 2 of the trial really did cause me pretty serious concerns. Anyone who has followed my channel knows I really try to avoid hyperbole, and I am going to try to be as fair as possible. But I am very concerned, and not just with Lori's performance. And I know that there's a lot of pressure because the true crime world is primarily X chromosome, and a lot of women, I mean, no disrespect, I am one, but women do tend to develop these kind of emotional attachments and want fairy tale stories with fairy tale endings. And it doesn't help that there are also people who are out there telling the story, and it's like whoever they don't like, that person is the bad guy. Even if it was a potential victim like my brother, it's like, oh, let's just really just focus on his negative traits and negative things that people have said about him, myself included. And with another victim, let's just focus on all the positives. Like this victim, I'm friends with this victim's family, and so I'm just going to only say positive things and basically present one victim as a perfect gentleman and the other as a perfect loser who or may not have been a victim as well. So I know that there's going to be, some potential blowback. I don't care. Like there are so many other channels that you never have to worry about this kind of coverage with. So, and they're really, really good channels. So, if you are someone who's like, I don't want to hear anything that, could be positive about I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole anymore. There was an issue that Lori had brought up maybe a couple weeks ago. I didn't really follow the pretrial hearings very closely. I have a very limited amount of time, and I don't find them particularly interesting. But she did raise an objection about the state presenting Detective Coons, who is now retired from the Chandler Police Department, but presenting him as an expert witness to talk about trajectory, and a couple things that I shared her concern about was, one, it did seem like potentially pretty late notice to switch it from a witness to an expert witness. But then, as far as I know, they never presented a CV for Detective Coons, and that's, as far as I know, that's part of the judicial process. Even in my world, in the professional world, like, you use a CV, it's like it's just a resume for professionals. Professionals also use resumes, but in the legal world, they use, they just call them CV. And to my knowledge, they never presented a CV for Detective Coons. And so I was a little concerned today, and I mean, no disrespect to the judge, I'm not going to keep building all these bridges. I'm so, grateful for the prosecution. I'm grateful for the judge. I'm grateful, that I live in a country that has, a constitution, and that we all have constitutional rights. But he had said today that, like, his memory was that she really mostly was concerned about the late notice, about like the late notice of the switch, and not so much about his qualifications. And that's not my memory at all. I don't think she ever relented on the point about the qualifications. And if they wanted to present him as an expert witness, then go through the hoops that apparently everyone goes through when presenting an expert witness, and one of those steps is submitting a CV. What are the person's credentials? I know today when he talked about one of his certifications, he just named some dude. He was certified through some, it was just a guy's name, and he said that he was a world-renowned expert in whatever it was. And I'm like, maybe, but at this point it's a little late to be looking it up to see, well, what are his credentials. So anyway, so that caused me a little bit of a concern, just because, and who knows, Judge Boreski might be remembering it more accurately than I did, or maybe Lori didn't really stand her ground enough on no, I don't think that he's an expert witness. But I do remember her being pretty insistent that all this time he's just been like a witness, a member of the Chandler Police Department, and now, and it may be. I think they did make it within the deadline of like making this change. I think the significant issue was where were his qualifications, So anyway, so again, maybe Judge Boreski is remembering it correctly, and I'm not. But that was just kind of a I don't. I mean, and I'm going to compare judges, whether it's fair or not. But one of the things that I really appreciated about Judge Boyce was I really appreciated that he was so careful not to communicate like a preference for the state, and in fact really held their feet to the flames, like when they turned over evidence late, and the first time it was a day late, and he did hold their feet to the flames. Like the whole point is to get the discovery in before, I forget the name of that hearing. Like it's like a pre-trial hearing. He's like, the whole point of it is, to get it in before the hearing. And so, they had said, oh, we thought it was just like by the end of the day. So, he held their feet to the flames a little bit, but admitted the evidence. But then they turned in a bevy of evidence 2 weeks later, and they had a hearing earlier that day, and we're talking about, well, we just want to do our due diligence and all this stuff. And even at the time, I was like, why are they being self-congratulatory? You're doing your job. And then we found out it was like at the end of the day, that's when they turned over a significant amount of evidence. And Judge Boyce, I mean, I'm sure like he's colleagues with these people, but at the end of the day, he was the judge, and he didn't go easy on them, and he took the death penalty off the table. And but anyway, so we're only on day 2. But there was a detail today, like with this, I was like, I'm not, like this gives me pause, but then there was a much bigger issue, and that's what I'm going to talk. Oh, there was one. Actually, okay, I'm going to save the biggest issue for last so that people can just bounce if they're like, all right, this is too much. This is a pretty small issue, but it was weird. So a little bit of background. When I was going through the police report, this was a few months ago, and I did a live, and I had separated out, like I figured out, okay, this part was the report by Detective Coons, this part was the report by Detective Moffat, this part was the report by, so-and-so, these different guys. So I kind of like spliced them out, and that took, some doing. And when I was going through it, I noticed that there was a reference to, it was something with the trajectory of the scarring in the wood floor when they moved Charles' body, that it was something that the ME had told the detectives who were present at, or maybe it was when they read his report, that it had something about, and if one of my mods reminds me, I'll find it, I'll look for it when we're in court tomorrow, and publish it on A Murderous Heart on the community tab. But there was some detail that it aroused suspicion about the placement of Charles' body. So I was like, okay. Well, because the pictures I had didn't include that groove in the flooring. So I was like, oh, Okay, so they were, suspicious about the placement of Charles' body. So did that mean that they thought that the placement of his body was contrived? Like someone moved his body after he was shot? I just wasn't really sure what that meant. Another piece of background, because we will touch this will lead into the next point, which I actually mentioned in another live, but I'm trying not to ever operate under the assumption that attending tonight's live means that you attended all of my other marathon lives. But one detail I noticed, and I pointed out to the people who are sitting next to me, is when they showed the drawing. So Detective Coon said it wasn't to scale, but it was like a layout of the house. And included in the layout of the house was a drawing of Charles' body, like the placement of his body. And the first thing that jumped out at me, because there is one picture that was in the pictures that were passed on to me where police accidentally didn't redact Charles' body. So I was able to see an unredacted photo of Charles. So I could see, and then today we saw unredacted photos if you were in the courtroom. And so you could clearly see the placement of his body. And he was, for the most part, parallel to the west wall. So on the west wall there is a mirror, and his feet were toward the kitchen, his head was toward the front door. So his head was facing north and his feet were facing south, and he was next to the west wall, just to try to give you an orientation there. And for the most part, he was parallel. Like, let's say this is the wall. His body was it like this? No, yeah, it was like this. It was like maybe at about like a 10-degree angle, something like that. But when they showed the drawing, and maybe I'm being overly particular, but his body was like at, I would say, a 40-degree angle. Like let's say behind me is the hallway that went back to the bedrooms. We know from Charles' testimony, I'm sorry, not Charles' testimony, Alex's testimony in the police report, they couldn't bring in his testimony in the trial because it's hearsay. Even like they had him draw out like where Charles was standing and all that. So I was kind of hoping we would at least see that, but I guess that's included in his testimony, and because he's dead, that's considered hearsay. But according to the police report, Alex was standing. So let's say this is the hallway behind me, and I'm standing at the end of the hallway, and to the left is like the front door, and this way is like the kitchen. It said in the police report that Charles was standing northeast of him. So that was like basically like that kind of puts Charles in the middle of the room and Alex in front of the hallway. And so the way they drew this diagram, it just looks like he like dropped the kind of almost, imagine like this is a 90-degree angle, this is a 45-degree angle. It was about 40 degrees, and but I just thought it was curious. Like, okay, so I understand that it's not drawn to scale, but there just seemed to be a disparity between what what we saw in the pictures and what I had seen even like long before we went to the trial, and then this diagram, and then I had it kind of tucked away in my head that there was something about the trajectory that the ME flagged as being suspicious. So I don't know. It might be something. It might be absolutely nothing. I just thought it was weird. Okay, the much bigger issue, not the biggest issue, but a much bigger issue for me was that, and I've brought this up before in other lives, but their theory, Chandler Police's theory, is that there were 2 shots. And we know that from Detective Moffat being interviewed by Dateline early on. And I've never agreed with it. There was one patrol officer who was caught on body cam, and I shouldn't say caught. He was, he was on someone else's body cam. He like turned the corner and said to another officer, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, something like that. I'm not adding the something like that. He said something like that. So we went from 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, something like that, to there were only 2 shots. So I do not believe that there were only 2 shots. I have believed ever since I saw the pictures from the police report that the shot that went, the bullet or the round that went into the baseboard, I do not believe and will never believe that that round actually hit Charles. Again, I talked about this a little bit last night, but today we actually saw the photos, and they were much more detailed photos than what I had seen before. And then Janice told me about a woman. I didn't get permission to ask if I could share the person's name, so I won't unless I get it down the road. But this person had gotten more pictures. This was before the trial started, and Janice had shared them with me over Facebook, but I've looked. I didn't know that they were shared with me, and the album is like nowhere on my Facebook, but she can't share them with me again. Anyway, so I asked her to send the pictures to me. So I haven't shared my screen on this laptop yet, so I probably should have tested this. Let me see if I'm going to be able to share it. If not, I'll share the photos on the community tab tonight after the live. Let me see. Yeah, it's I bet it's going to prompt me to restart. Yep, I can't do that. Okay, so yeah, the first time you share your screen, you have to quit and reopen, and I'm afraid I'll lose the live. But I will share them after the live. But what you'll see in these photos, which I had already seen before, like they really like dug into the baseboard, because they not only extracted the round, they actually took a piece of the baseboard with them, according to the police report. I don't think they talked about it today, about taking it with them, but prior to the trial, they said that in the police report. But these pictures confirm there is not an iota of blood, and there was also no testimony. Did you test the wood for any kind of bodily fluid or, blood, anything. But just looking at it, I mean, yeah, obviously they did a massive cleanup, and apparently that wasn't a red flag to Chandler police that Alex was shot with a very high power pistol, and there was no blood spatter anywhere. But they wouldn't have been able to go in and like clean all the blood out of the baseboard. And the first shot, the only shot that could have hit both Charles and this baseboard was the first shot. And that went through center mass, and it also hit his spine. So for it to, and I talked about this last night, but, I'll touch on it again. That was I think they said less than a 5-degree angle. So basically, Alex was standing, he had the gun out, he was only a few inches taller than Charles, so I think that probably accounts for, the 5-degree. He probably held the gun down a little bit, and then that was center mass. And so for the round to go through him, hit bone, and just happen to then like make a sharp turn and go into the baseboard, that doesn't make sense. But if it had, there would have been blood. And they showed even the round, like they pulled out the bullet, and there was no blood on the bullet. And so I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, how are they positing that, well, yeah, this was the shot that, this was the first shot, and we recovered the round from the baseboard. And anyway, so, and then the second round, honestly, I was furious today. It just felt like a dog and pony show. I understand. I don't mean this as a criticism to Trina. She was handed a total crap investigation. But, and there's only so much she can do with it. But there was so much dog and pony show. It was like all these inane questions, and people kind of super focus on the fact that Lori asks inane questions, where it's like, where are you going with this? Like, what? Like Trina was like, okay, did you find blood here? Did you find blood in this room? And they're like showing a picture of Tylee's room. Did you find blood in Tylee's room? Did you find blood in this room? Did you find blood in this room? Maybe they're just doing their due diligence, or alternatively, since we didn't, there wasn't any focus on the details that really, really matter, in my opinion. It could have been just that, a dog and pony show, to make it look like, obviously, they did a very thorough investigation, because they know, oh yeah, there was blood on the kitchen faucet. Well, we know from the police report, they took a picture of it, but they didn't send it for testing. Like, they didn't do any, like, DNA testing or anything like that. They just took a picture of it. So she's just going through what they had, but then it really hit, in my opinion, a point where a point of diminishing returns, because, like, at one point, she showed us a picture of a lanyard. Like, if you go to a conference and you get a lanyard, like, with your name on it. I don't know what it was from, but it was hanging on the wall. And she asked about that. And for that, the detective was like, no, there was no movement or any indication that, like, this lanyard had been affected. And I was just like, really, just like, what is going on? Like, who cares that the lanyard on the wall? There's never been testimony that, like, that Alex and Charles were wrestling all through the house. Like, supposedly this all happened in a pretty small area. So why would there be evidence of, a fight all through the house or blood all through the house. But then the details that, in my opinion, really mattered, like the what looked like an unspent round, like maybe 3 inches from Charles' shoulder. And I've talked about this before, but that second shot, it hit him in the lower right abdomen. It went kind of diagonally across his body, exited his left shoulder, and then and scarred the flooring. So, and that also, I think, hit a rib. So, it hit bone. It went along a wood floor, and deep enough to cause scarring in the floor. And then it just miraculously, instead of like continuing on in a trajectory that you would imagine that would make sense, it was just like, imagine like three, oh, wait. Yeah. It was maybe like 2 to 3 feet left of his left shoulder. There's nothing that explains that. And I think it was the fire captain, it was definitely someone from the fire department who had noted in the police report. And again, I saw this when I was like parsing out these individual reports. This person had noted that the round in the middle of the floor didn't look expanded. In other words, it didn't look like it was a spent round. And so I talked last night, I talked about this, and I also discussed this in a live where I showed like bullets from a similar gun. And well, it was like multiple bullets, and one was I think it was the exact, may have been the exact bullet that he had in his gun. But when it's spent, it like flowers, and but anyway, so and in the police report it just said that there was a red substance on it, but in the picture it just looked like someone had taken the bullet, maybe hit it with a hammer or something to make it look, because it didn't look brand new. But and who knows, maybe it really was a spent round. But even if it was, like, let's just say we suspend reality for a moment and say that was a spent round, there was no trail of blood to where it was chilling, and the trajectory was all wrong. So I was like, wait, so you submitted this guy as a trajectory expert, and there was just no testimony as to how that, like, the entire analysis that Detective Coons offered about that round was, he said there was some deformation. So it was deformed in some way. He didn't say it was spent. He didn't say that it looked like it wasn't spent. And it kind of makes sense because their investigation was so subpar that should have aroused suspicion, because there's no way you could bring in any kind of trajectory expert, in my opinion, and offer an explanation for how a round would go through all of that and then hang a sharp right and not even have a trail of blood. It's like it just popped out of his shoulder, landed a few feet to the left, and I mean, it should have had quite a bit of like flesh and blood, or something, and there was nothing. There just was nothing. And so I was like, here we're hearing about a lanyard hanging on a wall, and like, did this room have blood? Did this room have blood? How about, did you open the mustard jar? I mean, but not really. I'm getting ridiculous. But it was just like, let's just ask about all these irrelevant things. And then here's this one question. Now, I really wanted to hear, okay, you want to be a trajectory expert? Explain that. and explain to me how that didn't arouse suspicion, or the fact that there was no blood spatter anyway, or the fact that Alex and Lori showed absolutely no hearing loss or even tinnitus. They didn't grab their ears. I never saw them say, I'm sorry, what? You know, like what? They weren't straining to hear these detectives even when they were mumbling. They were prepared. Anyway, so, yeah, that was, I can't say that I was shocked, but it was, I don't know. It was annoying, and especially to see the detail of the baseboard. And I think Detective Coons even, like, he was a little self-congratulatory. Like, he made some comment. It was like, like, he was asked, if it was something about extracting the round from the baseboard, and it was like he's made some comment like, with great effort or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so okay. All right, so all of that, I think I hit on all the notes. Okay, so let me just check one more thing. Again, I had no time to prepare. Oh yeah, there was there was one other detail, and I have brought this up before in another live. It was the the placement of the casings. So again, I'm trying to. All right, imagine once again, I'm Alex, even have his initials, unfortunately, and I have the hallway behind me, and I'm kind of at an angle, and I shoot, and these casings, we know that they ejected to the right. I already knew that from having done research, and again, if you just search A Murderous Heart for Charles Vallow, you'll see the live that I did. But imagine this casing, it shoots to the right, so or I should say, it ejects to the right. So the round goes, straight, the casing ejects to the right. Just to the right of him was this wall. It's like the wall that separated her little dance room from the kitchen. But that wall also, it didn't have a sharp corner. It has a very rounded corner. So this casing, both of these casings, according to their testimony and their trajectory expert, he didn't find any issue with this, but these casings supposedly hit this wall and this curved corner, so somewhere along there, and instead of like bouncing into the room, which is what I would expect, they hit the wall and then must have flown over Alex, the shooter, and Charles, and both of them were along the west wall. So that, to me, I was like, but he testified that, yeah, that made sense. And I'm like, does it? Like, I would think, especially if they had actually brought in a trajectory expert and they had run tests with a similar wall like that, or just really any wall, but how many shots would it have taken to get two casings to hit this curved wall and come right back at them, instead of hitting at an angle and bouncing, like, hitting at an angle, I would expect it would then continue on at an angle. You know, the fact that it would have bounced right back, and it was so close to, like, one of them in particular was so close to where Alex had said that he had stood, for the, at least for the first shot. It strains credulity for me. I was like, really? Like, you know, and so again, this is where I think it's really unfortunate that Lori decided to represent herself. And, you know, it just sounds like she's not able to actually get a trajectory expert. And not that it would even really help her, because obviously, I mean, well, one of the things that, you know, I just kind of felt like, was today a waste? No one's contesting that Alex shot Charles. Like, I have my questions about that second shot, but for the sake of the trial, no, neither the state nor the defense are saying, well, no, you know, Charles wasn't actually shot. Like, they know he was shot, and they know that Alex shot him. Ostensibly, the whole point of this trial is to prove that Lori was a co-conspirator. You know, so maybe they just feel like this is, you know, establishing foundation, or, you know, whatever. But, you know, having a jury that's full of men, I do wonder, and now, you know, there's even like one fewer woman on, female on the jury. Yeah, I do wonder, like, are any of them going to question this? You know, because it's just a little weird. But anyway, okay. So that was the other detail. Now, the bigger issue was Lori again brought up the issue of according to her, and the state confirmed this, the state has not given the defense the extraction data from Charles' phone. So what they gave them instead was they ran the raw data through Cellbrite. It's one of multiple software that you can use to, you know, take this structured data and you compile it into reports. But, you know, as a data scientist, you know, I've built 4 apps. Well, I've built other apps, but 4, you know, 3 public facing, 1 it will soon be public facing, and 2 of them I built on what's called JSON, and 2 I built on a PostgreSQL database that I built from the ground up. I built all of these things from the ground up. And so this raw data, this extraction data, depending on, you know, like what service they used, it's either going to be like JSON or, you know, or like a raw database file, something like that, but it's in the raw form. And so what the state said today was that, or what I think what Lori said for the defense, was that they just gave the defense the report. So as a data person, I was just like, wait, what? No, that makes no sense to me. But my bigger concern, so and I did look it up. I, you know, did some research. Now, I have no legal training. You know, all those caveats that I always throw out there, you know, they still apply. But from everything that I read, a defendant has a right to the raw data. If you're handing over a report, you're basically saying, as far as I could tell, trust me, we took the raw data and we did you a favor and we ran it through the software and we're giving you the report. And we need you to trust us that we didn't filter anything out, we didn't leave anything out. And I'm not accusing the state of doing something like that, but our judicial system doesn't operate on trust, and so, and as a person with an interest, and obviously a vested interest in this case, the last thing I want to see is grounds for an appeal. And so when I heard, and I mean no disrespect to Judge Bresky, but when I heard his response, it did give me pause. It really gave me pause, because he essentially said to Lori that his take on it was that, and I don't want to misquote him, but my take on his take was that that the technology probably just wasn't there, and as the technology evolves, the state evolves with the technology. But I knew right from the get-go, like, that's a terrible assumption, because we've had extraction technology since we've had smartphones, and even before smartphones. I mean, like, we've had extraction technology since the early 2000s. So, I mean, we're only talking about 2000, what, they brought charges against her in 2022, something like that, to 2025. There haven't been any great technological advances. I'm pretty sure whatever the raw data format was at the time that they ran the extraction on Charles' phone. And also keep in mind, Chandler Police didn't run the data on Charles' phone until 2020, and I believe it was after the kids' remains were found. I think I could be wrong about that, but I know it was 2020. Or maybe that was when they pulled his iCloud phone records. But I was like, yeah, we certainly were not, breaking any speed records here. And I think they were like, oh, crap, we're probably going to have to do an actual investigation into this death. But I just thought that is not a safe assumption, to just give the state that much benefit of the doubt. And from what I could tell, his assumption was absolutely incorrect. And so, one of the things that I really appreciate about, like, the people who are, like, kind of in my, I don't want to say inner circle, because it's not like an exclusive kind of thing, but, like, the people who I really trust and, kind of throw things against the wall. I was talking to Gidget, whose house I was staying at, and I was, really chewing the cud on this, and she was like, and she was playing devil's advocate, and she was like, well, but why didn't Lori bring this up before now? And I said, well, I know that she brought it up like a couple weeks ago, because I believe this was the hearing where she actually accused the state of prosecutorial misconduct for not turning over this discovery. But when I was like, okay, I need white space. I need to go for a run and just really, think about this. And so when I was on the run, and I am going to veer into the conjecture lane, because I thought that is a really good point. Like, she's been in Arizona for a minute. Why didn't she start demanding this extraction data as soon as she took over, her own case? And as I was thinking about it, I thought, I bet she had her own concerns about this extraction data, because, just hang in there for a minute. If, and this is where some people are going to get upset, if you need storybook endings and you need to believe that, the good guys are always purely good, and their motives are pure as the driven snow, and the bad guys are pure evil, you're not going to like this part of the life. But let's just say that Charles knew Joe was killed. These people weren't being particularly careful, even when, like more bodies started to drop. Like, they were not careful at all. Like, it was probably toward, like, by the time Tammy was murdered, they were being a lot more careful, and at least Lori and Chad, and like, deleted their location data and stuff like that, but they still put so much in writing. But now imagine them in 2018. And I've talked about this before, but I think that the Cox family was kind of like this Mormon mafia family, and I think if they circled the wagons on someone, I think they felt justified in pretty much whatever they did. Like, you think back to what Janice said in one of her interviews, and she was like, Alex said to me, Mom, I tasered a pedophile. Like, that's how she just explained away his his attack on Joe, which cost him some time, not enough time, but a little bit of time in jail. But if this whole family knew about that, if Joe was murdered, and we know that Lori had no internal editor, because even when she took off for Hawaii after Joe was found, which that's a solid pattern, she was bragging to friends in Hawaii that she paid Alex to kill Joe. And, so imagine what she was telling her family and the people who were living with her, like, Colby, Zach, Kelsey. They were all living with her at the time that Joe was found, according to what Lori told me. And so there was another time where, oh, just a second, I need to let Gidget's dog in. He's sitting at the door and barking and wants to go in. I will be right back. Okay, so, so imagine if Joe was murdered and the whole family knew it. There was one text that Adam had sent Charles, and if someone reminds me, I will also put this out on the community tab either tonight or tomorrow. But he said something to the effect of, like, basically, Lori's done some stupid things that has, like, I don't know. It's if memory serves me, it kind of implied, like, that made the family look bad. He didn't use those words, but he said, like, but this is the worst. So imagine, if you will, imagine if the whole family was on board with Joe being killed, because, this family was very hysteria driven, and it was like, oh, he's this terrible person. It was very clear that he had just moved back to Phoenix, or he had just moved into that apartment. He had new phone information, new, like, trash. The router was set up in the bathroom. The only thing he had set up were the shelves with the with the pictures of Tylee. Nothing else was set up in his apartment. A little bit the kitchen, but imagine if the family was like, okay, we got him, and who knows what they all said to each other in text messages, and now because Lori, that wasn't enough to murder one ex. Now she had her eyes on another ex, or soon to be ex, estranged husband. I can imagine that although Summer was all in, Adam may have had some concern. Like, you know what? She got away with it once, but this time she's going too far. Like, this is too much of a body count. And if, and this is a big if they knew, like, that, like, who knows what Adam said to Charles, what Charles said to Adam, and all over the place. Lori had no idea what Charles had texted other people or what evidence may have been on his phone of this murder. So where am I going with this? I suspect that Lori was ambivalent at best about getting this data on her phone, but may have brought in, maybe when the investigator joined the team or something, there was something that someone on her team said, you know what, we need the data on Charles' phone. And if they were willing to gamble that the state wasn't going to pursue any evidence about Joe's murder because it could make their victim look bad, then it's kind of like, I wonder if someone on her team said, you know what, they're not going to use this evidence because no one wants to prosecute. No one wants to investigate Joe's death. I think Maricopa County wants out of this. This is about as much, they'll endure the Brandon trial. They at least put a little bit more effort, like Gilbert police put a little bit more effort into that investigation. At least they canvassed the neighborhood and stuff like that. But then they totally let Melanie off after one interview that they allowed her to do with her toddler daughter. So it's like, oh, well, let's not use the M word and stuff. So anyways, so I wonder if Lori wasn't sure she wanted this data, but then someone convinced her, no, we need this data, and if nothing else, we may be able to get them on prosecutorial misconduct because they only gave us this report. They didn't give us the data. So who knows? But it is a concern. And it's not too late, but I'm hoping that the court deals with this sooner rather than later, because I could imagine, an appellate court saying, no, we don't pass on reports of a phone dump. The other thing is that, and again, I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but you have to be willing, to at least entertain the idea that there may be exculpatory information on Charles' phone, and I've talked about this in another live, but there are some details that are concerning. Like, he did make very specific threats to Lori. It wasn't just like, I don't know. It may not happen today, but be looking over your back, be looking over your shoulder kind of thing. Like, they were ominous threats. But then also, we know that we've known for a while the last website that he browsed on his computer. I'll try to see if I can pull it up. So it would have been obviously on 710. Although I think it may have actually been early in the morning on the 11th, but let me see if I can find it. Um, hmm. Yeah, it was, oh, okay. So, Charles visited, this was the day before he was murdered. It was in the evening, I think. It was 6:49 p.m., but I don't think that that was Arizona time. But anyway, it was the day before he was murdered, and it was the last browsing artifacts on his phone prior to his death. So we know that he went out on a date with Nancy Jo. We will hear from Nancy Jo. But the last website he browsed was National Life Group. No, we know that he sold life insurance. So I still thought it was kind of a little unusual because, I run a business, but I don't typically do a lot of business on my phone. And that night he was also like going out on a date. He had a lot going on. So, I just kind of tucked it away. And then we never found out. So they didn't mention in that a police report out of Arizona, to my memory, that there was any significance to this national life. We didn't find out until Lori's trial. And, you can just go to my timeline. If you just search Annie Cushing timeline, it will come up. But that was the company that they had her $2 million life insurance policy with. And she didn't change the beneficiary to her son, Colby, for a month after Charles' murder. So it appears that he was still, and I think she may have even mentioned at the trial, I should look that up, that he was the sole beneficiary of the policy. Hey, do you need anything?
Can I bring you any wings or anything?
Oh no, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to eat them.
Soda?
Oh, sure. I'll take a soda.
Which one?
Do you have any more of the Fresca?
Mm-hmm. There was 2 flavors. Which was the one you liked?
Was it peach? Sorry.
Peach. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. But anyway, so there is the possibility that I'll just leave it at this. There may be exculpatory evidence on his phone that at least provides some evidence that that self-defense was warranted. Am I taking up for Lori? Absolutely not. Do I think that this was in any way self-defense? No. I think that this was a targeted hit. And really, I think it was murder for hire. I think, Alex thought he was going to get a cut of the $1 million life insurance. Lori didn't have any assets. But we also know that he had $2,000 cash in a suitcase in his hotel. So those are details that, like if there is exculpatory evidence on his phone, it would be very bad for the state to, like, that doesn't make the state look good. Like, you're not handing over the raw data, you're handing over a report, but there is potentially exculpatory evidence. Thank you. And exculpatory meaning, it is evidence that at least in some way explains why she may have felt like she needed to be defended, or puts her in a little more favorable light. So was I still annoyed at Lori, absolutely. I don't think she should be defending herself. Uh, I don't think that there's really like a clear agenda. I think she's just asking questions just to, um, make her, I don't know, justify being up there. I don't think she really knows what to ask these different witnesses. But at the same time, I wasn't particularly, so far, really haven't been particularly impressed with the state's questions either. I think that they were both asking, just a lot of questions where you're just like, where is this going? And I understand that there may need to be foundation that they'll circle back on, and there is that possibility. Oh, there was one other thing that happened today that, while I'm on a roll, it was a little bit of a and I said yesterday, I really, really appreciate how much more relaxed Arizona, the courts are. I think it just really helps that no one working in the course, like, they don't know that I'm a family member or that, I have any relation to this case. So I'm not like forced to sit with the other victims and, some of the ways that, I some of the injustices I feel like I experienced in Idaho, or like passive aggressive behavior, just really kind of stupid petty stuff. But today there was a juror who Janice pointed out to me that he was on his phone, and it wasn't just. And I was kind of surprised from yesterday that they even allowed jurors to have their phones with them, because the judge addressed one of them, like, apparently it was like the juror's phone that caused, like, I think the loud noise, the disturbance, in the middle of the hearing yesterday. So I was already surprised by that, but then this one juror was just chilling on his phone, and for a pretty protracted period of time. Like, Janice pointed it out to me, and then I kept looking at him. I'm like, are you serious? Like, he's not even, he just wasn't being chill about it. My buddy came back. But anyway, so yeah. So they brought him in by himself, and we had already had another juror dismissed. So one juror was dismissed yesterday. Like, the judge allowed him to be dismissed because he claimed hardship, and it was still a little like questionable, just because it was like, okay, well, you did have opportunity to address this, earlier. But then another juror just. We don't know what happened there, but she isn't a juror anymore. So now they're down 2 jurors, and then here's this juror just chilling on his phone. And so the judge asked him if he was on his phone, and he just lied. He was like, no, I wasn't. And then he said something about, like, he wasn't, like, I don't know, looking at websites or anything like that. And the judge even asked him, like, but did you look at your phone? And he, I believe he still said no. And then he said, oh, well, it was just a text from my daughter, and I was checking to see if she was awake, or something like that. And so I can understand the judge's concern in letting another juror go. But it was one thing that I was like, okay, so in Idaho, when there was a concern that someone who is writing a book about the case may have taken a picture in the courtroom on her phone was taken and looked through. And at least at that time, there no one took his phone. No one, checked his history or whatever. So that was a little surprising. I don't know if it's just that like they're just that chill in Arizona, but yeah, it was just notable. Like, oh, okay, like because they can't afford to lose many more jurors. That would be bad, but yeah, hopefully we won't have any more issues with jurors. But anyway, so that was it. Oh, I don't lick me. Um, uh, but I'll take some questions and then call it a night. Okay, so if you have a question, just put the word question in all caps or use the question mark emoji. Mm. Um, yeah, um, yeah, Janet, hi. She said, I wonder if the raw data is there, but Lori and the investigator didn't know what it was to give to the expert. Could be their error. I doubt it. I really doubt it because their expert would have also known what to look for. So yeah, I don't. And also the state never said, "What are you talking about? We totally gave you the raw data." So they're to my knowledge, no one has ever asserted that the state actually handed over the raw data. I think the assertion is, well, they gave them a report. And maybe there just wasn't the technology to give them what they wanted sooner. Okay. Yeah, Felicia, I love that my mods are being. I never get to read like comments, but yeah, Felicia, one of my wonderful mods, along with Janet, had said when I did jury duty, we had to put our phones in a basket, and a bailiff took them away until the end of the day. That is South Carolina. So yeah, I've never heard of jurors being able to keep their phones. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but I think you're putting a lot of trust in the jurors. But then also, like, are we really just like taking the jurors' word for it? Because even Trina, the prosecutor, I believe she was the one who, and I thought the same thing. I was like, I think this guy's on ChatGPT because one of the jurors asked like these, I think it was like 3 questions that are quite detailed, like you asking I believe it was Detective Coons on the stand, like, did you follow this protocol? And they were like very specific protocols. So it really seemed like this person was either in that industry and familiar with all this jargon, or this person was like, searching Google, or just like, hey, ChatGPT, what would be good questions to ask? So, oh yeah, Kelly said, oh, what a pretty dog. He's so sweet. He he's my little buddy. Both of her dogs are so, so sweet, but he loves playing ball, and I love getting dogs all wound up. So he never wants to give me the ball, but he wants me to throw the ball, so I just kind of have to wrestle him for the ball, which he loves. He's so, so, so sweet. Uh, Marianne, I don't know what you're saying. The judge read it and indicated he did. He also indicated it showed the additional data was irrelevant. Lori agreed. If you're talking about the extraction data, that's not how it went down at all. Like the judge wouldn't have been able to look at the extraction data, and Lori certainly didn't agree that the other data was irrelevant. So maybe you're talking about something else, but Yeah, Beverly, I know. I was there. I know that, he said he was texting his daughter, but, again, he was right in front of us, and he had been on his phone for quite a while. And that was just when it was pointed out to me. I don't really watch the jurors because, again, I'm coding the whole time. But yeah. Uh, And Marianne said her guy submitted an affidavit disclosing what he found. I don't know what you're saying, so I don't know which issue you're talking about. Um, okay, let me see. If we don't have any questions, then we may be able to just call it a night. Yeah, I agree with you, Beverly. She said her questions are simply a stab at trying to make herself seem relevant. Um, yeah, like some of her questions, I'm just like, where are you going? And it was interesting that she asked Detective Coons twice about if there was stippling. So there's stippling. I remember looking this up when I was really going through the ME's report and the police report about stippling. But according to the ME's report, there wasn't. There weren't signs of stippling for either shot, meaning they weren't shots that were at close range. So yeah, so I don't know. I think there was excuse me. I think there may have been some other discussion in the police report about stippling. I can do a quick search here. I think I downloaded it. Let me just do. Oh no, it was only. Excuse me. It was only addressed, at least, in an unredacted way in the ME's report, and the ME did look for stippling and did note. In fact, I may have the ME's report open. Yeah, I do. Let me search for stippling. Uh, excuse me, perforating gunshot wound of the abdomen. So this was the second shot. Entrance, left abdomen. Oh, I said right abdomen. It was entrance. It was the left abdomen, but there was still an angle. No projectile or projectile fragments recovered. You know. Oh, no soot deposition of gunpowder, stippling identified. So I believe the implication here was that it just wasn't at close range. I remember doing quite a bit of research. If you look up Charles Vallow on A Murderous Heart, I did go into the stippling detail. Now it's just not fresh in my mind, but the other one, oh, that was also the abdomen. But so I guess he didn't even address it with the chest. But uh, but yeah. So Lori said something to the effect of like, so then would you be surprised if you found out there was stippling? And oh, that was another annoyance. Um, I, like with the detective, again, I'm already kind of going into this with like, it's one thing to read the police report and see the abysmal investigation, but it's like kind of throwing salt in an open wound to hear them testify. And I understand they have to do it. They have to try to make it sound like this investigation was a legitimate investigation and that, they turned over every stone, searching for the truth of what happened. and they just didn't. But Detective Coons, I really don't like when these witnesses, especially those who, in my opinion, just didn't do a good job, are now like being so arrogant toward Lori. And it's not like I feel like she deserves better, but I do feel like they need to uphold a level of professionalism. Like, you're being called as a witness because you assisted in some way in this investigation, and this investigation was so poor that two kids lost their lives, and a mother and grandmother also lost her life because of this piss poor investigation. And I also always throw in Eldon Clausen. I believe that he was absolutely a victim of Chad and Lori. But, but like, people lost their lives. We lost a critical, potential witness. Like, you know, Alex could have turned state's witness. And, they didn't arrest him. Even when he was back in Arizona, they're like, one of them testified in Idaho. I think it might have been Detective Pillar. It was one of them. Like, yeah, we had 24/7 surveillance on Alex, on his house, and they had cameras up on light poles in front of these different, players' homes and stuff. And I'm like, well, what for? Like, there's even a note in the Gilbert police report that the detective saw Alex and Zulema getting into a white truck and going out. And I'm like, who cares? Like, what were you waiting for? Like, how many more bodies were supposed to stack up before you just arrested him? Bring him in for questioning. But I mean, they had probable cause on top of probable cause on top of probable cause to arrest him. But so these people, they they failed on so many levels. And then I feel like, and maybe I'm being unfair, but I feel like they just kind of play to the crowd because they know everyone hates Lori. Obviously, what she has done is deplorable. And like, a commenter told me that I lose credibility focusing on like how diabolical Lori was. And I mean, no disrespect to the commenter, but I was like, well, then, I'm willing to lose credibility because, her diabolical tendencies resulted in the murder of innocent kids. And the part of what makes this story as tragic as it is it's not like so many like stranger on stranger murders where you don't know. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw, or someone sees someone and they attack, RAPE, they murder, they do all of these different things. In this particular case, so many people could have saved these victims. So many people knew that these kids were in imminent danger. And some of them have profited off this case and continue to profit off this case after having done nothing. And this isn't a coulda, woulda, shoulda. There were glaring signs. People were profiting even, off of the kids even before the case went public. So in this particular case, when I see people from Chandler, or any Chandler or Gilbert police get on the stand and be arrogant, be difficult, like a couple times I felt today like, he was willing to answer all kinds of questions that were pretty ridiculous from the state. Like I said, like about, like wall hangings and stuff. And he answered with sincerity. And then Lori's asking him questions. Yeah, a lot of them, they were really stupid. But I'm just like, this is the least you can do. Like, you have an ethical responsibility to answer questions as, as and be as helpful as you can, because when you're overly technical, knowing that Lori's going to have no idea what you're talking about, there are also jurors who will have no idea what you're talking about. And so anyway, so I was quite annoyed by that, and I really don't like even just these beginning signs of some of these people who, in my book, whether this is fair or not, they have blood on their hands. For them to get up and now like just play to the crowd, and knowing that probably the majority of people reporting on the case will be like, oh yeah, and then he says to her, he says, blah blah blah, like this is some kind of bravado. I'm not impressed. I'm like, yeah, I understand it's probably really difficult to answer her questions, just like it was difficult for witnesses to answer like John Pryor's questions, but the ones I respected the most were the ones who they just answered them with sincerity. It bothered them, but especially if they were involved in the investigation, it's like, well, suck it up, Buttercup, do your job. You didn't do your job before, and people lost their lives. Children lost their lives. A special needs child lost his life. And 2 kids, before they lost their lives, they had a year of absolute hell. That these members of law enforcement and like family members and these different people, like they could have stepped in. They could have saved them. They could have easily saved them, even just by doing their job. Even if they didn't do a particularly great job at it, just doing their job would have saved the kids' lives. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I mentioned last night, like, I was shocked to find out that Lori and Tylee met with a victim's advocate before they even left the police station. I can't imagine what that must have been like for Tylee, just to know, okay, well, I can't rely on my family because they're all in her pocket or scared of her, or they don't like me. They think I'm a punk. And it just really seemed like she was, alone. I mean, even when she drove from Phoenix to Idaho, she made one call that we know of, and it wasn't to any family members. It was to her friend. I believe her name was Ashlyn. And Ashlyn had told the police that Tylee said she didn't want to be alone. And, and so, yeah. So I hope that they pull it together, and I hope they start being more professional. I feel for them. I also hope that, I don't know, it would be interesting to find out from those of you who are watching if you can even hear the judge and the prosecutor, because we're sitting on the second row and it's so hard to hear them. The judge sits back, so he's away from his microphone. And in the trials in Idaho, it was Judge Boyce who really just kind of like had to stay on top of all of the attorneys to make sure that they were talking into the microphones for the sake of the record. And for so much of it, I couldn't hear the judge. I mean, even when there would be an objection, I couldn't hear if he sustained it or overruled it. And ironically, the only one who is consistently speaking into her microphone is Lori. the prosecutor, I, I don't know. It seems like maybe for most of it, she wasn't speaking into her microphone. And no one else is talking at her table, so I don't know why she can't just put the microphone in front of her. But I remember in Idaho, Judge Boyce really emphasized, like, for the sake of the record, they all needed to talk into the microphone. And, for those trials, it was mostly John Pryor who had the most difficult time complying, and he did get better at it. And, but yeah, so I don't, if I were listening to this at home, I would be quite frustrated. But maybe the feed is actually better than the sound in the courtroom. Okay, I'll see if there are any more questions now that I've kind of talked for a little bit. I'll drop down to the bottom. Oop. Okay. Sandra said, I can only hear because I have a Bluetooth speaker synced to my phone. So, well, that's good. At least maybe then the record will be sustained. Really sorry about my appearance. Like, I knew I was going to look like trash tonight. Okay, let me check with my mods to see if they are aware of any questions. I know in our normal lives, they capture some of the questions. So let me just check in there, just because I don't want to waste time and just looking through the chit chat as much as I love the chit chat. And even when I review it afterwards, during my like regular lives, I'm always like, it's such a bummer that I can't join in that. Just a second here. It seems like anytime I try to get into Messenger, I have to enter this stupid code. Okay, the live questions. Let's see. Oh, Wanderer asked, you may have said, but is she coming across well in the courtroom? She is so off-putting, it seems to me. No, she's not coming across well in the courtroom. I mean, obviously, we're all inclined to not see her favorably, but the judge did address some of her editorializing, and again, I appreciated that he addressed this gently, that he wasn't harsh with her. He pointed out, like, okay, so after someone testifies, like, she would add on comments like, oh yeah, that was my observation too, or something like that. And he did say, that crosses the line into a testifying. And but I thought he was really, really gentle with her, and she replied very respectfully, yes, Your Honor, and so I think I was I want to give credit where credit's due. I think she's handled some of the pushback better than I thought that she would. I was also personally, I was impressed that she pushed back against the judge when the judge said, my impression is that as newer technology comes available. I mean, he was really willing to give the state the benefit of the doubt, and Lori pushed back, and she was right. She's like, this has nothing to do with new technology. They've had the extraction data and they need to turn it over. And I was like, well, as far as I can tell, she is not wrong on that. So, I was impressed with that, but I may have been the only one who was impressed just because I'm like, no, well, one, I'm a bit of a Rain Man. Like, well, you know what? These, I really care most about the facts, but at the end of the day, the judge upholding the law and the facts is what garrisons, like family members from having to do this all over again. So anyway, but yeah, overall, no, she's annoying. She isn't informed, and I think she's trying to come across as personable, but no one wants her to be personable. So I don't know that there's any good way for her to do it. I think her best approach would be to just be really professional and to be better prepared, like with her questions and stuff. It does seem like she's winging it a little bit, which I was a little surprised by because I'm like, I mean, you've had nothing but time to prepare these questions, but at the same time, I did think that all this time they had the extraction and data. So, oh, Janelle asked, does Lori look around to see who is in the courtroom? Yes, mostly when she turns around to talk to her investigator. I mean, she is a naturally curious person, so I'll see her look around. And I imagine it was a bit of a hit to her ego. Like yesterday, the courtroom was full. Today, I want to say it was probably only about half full. So, the interest really dropped off significantly, which I imagine that is tough for her to see. Kondo asks, I think the stippling was interesting. I believe Lori when she said it showed on the report. Uh, I will be interested to see, how she brings that in if there was stippling. But I mean, it's only the ME who could bring that evidence in, and unless I'm misunderstanding the ME's report or they now I did just notice tonight as I was talking about it that both references to stippling were just talking about the uh, the the round that entered. Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. Through his abdomen. So yeah. So maybe there's something else that talks about the first wound, but yeah, they kind of can't win on this because again, if there was stippling, that means, as from what I remember when I did this research on stippling, it indicates that he was shot at very close range. And then again, I mean, it really doesn't explain how that round ended up in the baseboard with no blood or human matter. The prosecutor used an interesting term today, and I wish I had recorded it in my notes. I was like, oh yeah, that's an interesting term for, like just human, I don't know, artifacts. I don't know what's the best way, the most genteel way to approach that. Darlene asked, did you hear an opening? She said she left the house with Tylee, but Tylee said, my mom sent me out to be with JJ. Uh, yeah, I wasn't sure what to make of that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she's so chaotic. But so far, I mean, we're only on day 2, but so far I haven't heard anything. Although, like, aside from a couple references in Trina's opening statements, I really haven't heard anything from either side where anyone's even like remotely focused on the actual like charges at hand, which was um, conspiracy. So yeah, it's just kind of like, well, who cares? I mean, she already said in her statement to police after the shooting that she put herself in the kitchen. And she said that she had just run into the kitchen because Charles was then chasing her with the bat. And I mentioned last night she made this like kind of backhanded motion, and also said that he was like basically bam bamming it, you know, like she also made this forward swinging motion. And again, like there's just no way. I'm like, couldn't you have at least like watched a baseball game? Like, did you ever watch your husband play baseball? Do you know anything about the mechanics of baseball and how to use a bat? Like, how in the world was she so bad? But I think one, you know, I've said from the start, I don't think she's intelligent, and it's not because I think she's, I'm not saying that because I think she's despicable. There are plenty of criminals who are intelligent but despicable. None in this case, but um but yeah, I just think she was so used to relying on her charm and really just didn't sweat the details. She was just all over the place, and she and Alex didn't even sync up their stories. So, yeah, but it wouldn't help her in any way since she already put herself in the kitchen and said when she heard the shot, well, what about the other shot? You know? So it's just weird. Holly asked, "Did Lori make eye contact with you at all?" I noticed when I went for the first trial in Idaho, she had like a much more protracted uh, eye contact because I was also with my daughter, and she hadn't seen my daughter since she was like 15. And so I think that was probably, she looked a little stunned. But I wouldn't really know, like we very briefly made eye contact once, but I wouldn't really know if she was looking at me because I am really just focused on my computer. I'm listening, I'm taking notes if there's anything interesting. There honestly have been so few interesting details to date, but I'm not really looking around a whole lot because I'm also trying to like get this app up and running. Uh, okay. Um, But Lori said her dad sold the life insurance and he tried to sell it. Really confusing. Yeah, I don't know where she was going with that. I know she wanted to make her dad a witness, so I think she was like trying to bring that in. But mm, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what she was what point she was making, but um you know what? Let me pull up the app. I'm sorry, baby. He was all comfortable. I was like cradling him like a little baby. Um, let me see. Hopefully, I didn't close out of my app. No, I didn't. I think I'm still connected to the server. So I'm just going to search really quickly for. Insurance is going to be, oh, National Life. Because with this app, I can search, whoops, I can search across the trials. National Life. No, I didn't. Let me just search for National. So I know it came up in one of the trials. What was it? National Life? I think it was National Life. Yeah, it's not coming up. Maybe, um, yeah, I'll have to search that. Oh, maybe Nate didn't include the insurance company in his coverage. Anyway, uh, okay, let me go back to the mod questions. Will these texts one day be available to the public? Mm. Are you talking about like from the extraction data? If so, there's so much information. Like one thing I am curious, I would be very curious about with the extraction data. It wouldn't be their primary focus, but I was doing some research today about extraction data and asked, would the extraction data also include like locally stored data from apps? So, for example, let's say he used the Amazon app. uh, like, would they be able to see like when the Amazon app like what would they be able to see like when his Amazon account was accessed after his death? That's something I'm very curious about, and I don't think it's ever going to be brought in as evidence, because if it came out that family members, we'll just keep it broad, accessed his his Amazon data early on, the scrutiny and the clapback would be overwhelming, because it would indicate that whoever was accessing his Amazon account knew much earlier when they had moved to Idaho and would have seen, hey, you know what, nothing is being purchased for kids, even though we're like in back to school season and things like that. Um, and, if that Amazon data, if that Amazon account was accessed, God forbid, before Tammy died, like if anyone knew that Lori had purchased a wedding dress, their rings, all of these things that Kay said she found searches for, but then also kind of added like in comments on other lives and here and there, like, oh yeah, I also saw like a bikini and stuff like that. But if anyone accessed that Amazon uh, account before Tammy was murdered, that really would be tragic, because it would mean that uh, that Tammy could have been saved, because they already knew that Lori was having an affair with Chad, and Kay didn't give law enforcement Chad's name until after Tammy was murdered. It was like days later, and it was like Chad Daybell, the cult leader. Da 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 da. Before that, she was like, I don't know the cult leader's name. I don't remember the cult leader's name. And so, anyway, yeah. Do we know how long after Charles' death law enforcement began a murder investigation? I think they sent the bat out. I think that was. Let me search for baseball bat. I think that was like September. I'm trying to find it in the timeline. Let me see here. I just have so many details in this timeline. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was September. I think they got like a dump of his phone first, but yeah, I just don't think much of an investigation was done. You know, I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that like they met with family members and stuff, but you know there are a lot of details that it's just like, okay, you have these family members. We know at least Kay and Adam were both sent the videos that Lori had sent Chad of her dancing. Is Charles sent them to him, and there's no evidence that any of them had been forwarded to police. Kay was telling them she didn't even know who the cult leader was, and said, you know, something to the effect of, I wonder if she would find her next in Hawaii. So she didn't even reveal. Yeah, that was July 23rd. She said they expect Lori will find her next, in other words, her next lover or husband or whatever in Hawaii. So that definitely sent a message that there was no next. She was already with her next. And Charles had intercepted the ratings document in January 2019, and Kay was his ride or die. And she even said in her interview with Dr. Phil that, and we were interviewed in February 2020, and she said it was about a year ago that she had first heard Chad's name. And I was like, yeah, that tracks, because you know, we were interviewed in February 2020, and she would have most likely heard of Chad's name when Charles did, you know, because she said herself that, you know, she was his main confidant. So yeah, so yeah, it's just a mess. So I don't know how many of these texts will be made public. Or how long after his death they actually started a real murder investigation. Oh, Kelly asked, did they ever use luminol? No. There has never been testimony that they used luminol. And if they had, that room would have lit up. And they absolutely should have used luminol. Like, you go into a room where someone's shot with a high power pistol twice, and the only blood is pooled around his neck and underneath him, like, and you don't suspect that there's a cleanup? You don't luminol anything? It's just, I have no idea what they were thinking, but it does make me wonder how many murders just go uninvestigated in this area, at least this city, this metro area in Phoenix, because I even trying as hard as possible to give people as much benefit of the doubt as possible, they just get no benefit of the doubt. When Alex walked out, they didn't even search him. Like, they just had him sit down, and it wasn't until he was about to go into the car, and I think I may have mentioned this last night. I think it was about when he was about to go into the police car, that he was like, he like held up his hands and said something, like he basically prompted them to search him, and I forget what the detective said, but it was like, it was so casual. Like, yeah, I guess we should do that. And I think they may have joked a little bit, because it was a weird, awkward moment. But uh, whoa. Okay, but Lori asked a question. I'm going to skip over Lori's question and come back to it. Beverly said, tonight Nate said jurors literally rub elbows with the public outside the courtroom and can overhear all. Now, we did see that, like, when we were in the little cafeteria area eating, and the same juror who had his, phone out, like, he was sitting at a table by us because one of the women pointed out, like, and yesterday, one of the women in our group said, I think that's a juror right behind, like, I was talking about the case, but I kind of dismissed it because I was like, well, I'm pretty sure they would be sequestered. But yeah, but then today we, definitely were able to identify, yeah, that's a juror. So I don't know. I think it's just so different here. It's because in Idaho they weren't sequestered in terms of, like, like they didn't make them stay in a hotel, until they were actually deliberating. But they were able to go home and stuff like that, but they weren't able to, like, roam the courthouse freely. So yeah, so I have seen that. I hope that they're not actually talking with people. I know that that would be a violation, but maybe his point was, they're in earshot of us, and that I have seen. Um, okay, do you think the prosecution would cover for the police in this situation? Watching from afar, it worries me that they were so abysmal and their poor practice would help Lori. I think, again, I don't want to, I really, really don't want to be unfair, but the prosecution has been handed a terrible case, and she has to make it look like, wow, they really did their due diligence. So we're just going to ask all these questions to fill up all this time and talk about things that, in my opinion, were just completely irrelevant. But so, would they cover for the police in this situation? I will say this. I mean, it certainly happened. It has happened. Not this prosecutor, to my knowledge, but it does happen. Like, I mean, you hear about this kind of stuff in the appeals process. Like, someone comes along and Lori may have an attorney step forward who's, a really good appellate attorney, and is like, you know what, we're going to dig into this, because this may be grounds for appeal. This may be grounds for appeal. Even in Idaho, and they ran a pretty tight ship, but, like, they've already submitted, the documentation around the appeals, and they're presented like, did the state overstep in, blah blah blah. And one of the things was, again, I'm going to really misquote, and now we don't have access to those documents, but it was like, basically, did the state misstep in talking about co-conspirators without naming the co-conspirators? And I forget the details now. It's been quite a while, but yeah, I mean, it happens. That's why I'm really surprised that the state, and again, unless there's some detail that I'm missing, like, oh, in cases like this, the defendant, or maybe pro se cases, or whatever, the defendant is not actually eligible to receive the raw data from the, the extraction data. I don't think that we're going to find that out. I think I'm a little surprised that the state would even take that risk of, like, why withhold this information? Why even think that a report in lieu of the raw data would be acceptable on any level? Like, there's so I don't know. Again, all the caveats apply, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, this was I think the last question. Oh no, a couple more questions. How was Alex not arrested? It could have ended the killing spree. What a horrible cluster. You know what? And so sad. Yeah, these are rhetorical questions. All questions I have asked. They had probable cause to arrest Alex the day of the shooting. He, by his own testimony, now, do I believe that he actually retreated to his room to get the gun? No, I think that Charles was plowed down as soon as he walked into the house. And I personally suspect that his baseball cap, which again, they offered no explanation for, like, why is Charles on the south side of the room and his baseball cap is on the north side of the room? It's certainly, like, my guess is they lured Charles into the room. The only way to get to the backyard was through that dance room, and then they would have had to walk through the family room, and there was a glass door to get out to the backyard. So I wonder if they told Charles that JJ was in the backyard and you need to, like, go get him. and either Charles saw Alex, but I suspect Alex was hiding in the hallway, and either Charles saw him and avoided being shot, or Alex, we know he's a bad shot, he just missed Charles, and then there was just a scramble for Charles to try to get out of the house, which may explain why why his baseball cap was on the very north side of the room. But also, since there was a massive cleanup, and I don't know if anyone's going to testify to this, but again, someone from the fire department noted that there was very little bleeding from the second wound, and the abdominal wound, and when I looked that up, like, okay, so he noted that. Why was that notable? What I learned was that when there's little bleeding from an exit wound, it's usually an indicator that the victim was either already dead or incapacitated, because when the heart is beating, it's pushing blood out, and that's why there was so much more blood from the first wound, from the chest wound, because his heart was still beating. He was fighting for his life. But the second wound, there was very little, and that was also an indicator that Alex hadn't performed CPR, because that also would have pushed more blood out of the exit wound. But yeah, so for all we know, like, they dragged him to that spot. Like, we just don't know. Like, anything could have happened. The only thing that we do know is that that's where Charles was for the second shot, because of the groove in the wood floor. Other than that, I think that I strongly suspect that Alex retrieved the bullet that actually hit Charles' center mass, and so it could have been anywhere, and especially because they didn't luminol, we don't know. Okay. Uh, has any of Lori's first three husbands spoken? Well, not Joe. He was the third, but he was most likely the first victim. The other two husbands, no, they haven't. They haven't made any statements. And honestly, I don't blame them. They had nothing to do with this. I personally, and this isn't a flex, I know people dig into their lives, looking for information. Um, I just don't, just because I'm like, they weren't involved. I really do try to give people their privacy. The one thing I will say is Colby posted a picture of him and his half brother, and his biological father clearly had very powerful genes because they look so much alike. But so I know that he met his half brother and posted that picture, and it's a really sweet picture. Is Janice doing her funny videos like she did with Chad's trial? That's a good question. I imagine. I don't think she has yet. She did one from the Dateline episode. That was quite funny. But I don't think she's done any yet. But anyway, someone said I can't hear prosecution and sometimes the judge. That was Anna. And Lori G said the prosecutor is always difficult to hear and sometimes the judge. And that has been my experience. I feel like at this point, like, whoops, I accidentally tapped. Oh, okay. Um, yeah, like I felt like yesterday I could hear the prosecutor more, but today I was just like, do they even have, excuse me, do they even have a microphone on her table? Because like sometimes I could hear her, but it wasn't through a microphone. It was just because I was on the second row. But, like I said, I do hope that they'll get on top of that. Because they have those microphones for a reason. Or put lapel mics on these people. Like if they can't figure out how to use a microphone, that's on the table, I don't understand why they don't just put lapel mics on them. It's easy technology and it doesn't move. But okay. All right. I don't see any other questions. So we will call it a night, and I'm not committing to do this every night, but I'm going to try, at least if there's something interesting, in one way or another. Again, I'm not doing this reporting to try to win friends and influence people, um, but yeah, I do hope that I do hope moving forward there'll be like a little more buttoned down, and maybe if the judge isn't aware of something that like leans more technology or something. Like I know Judge Boyce, like there were times he would just say, I'm going to take some time, and he had an assistant who was an attorney. He didn't call her an assistant, he called her, forget what he called her, but it was like something research. And so she would be behind the scenes, like doing research and stuff. And he would just say, I'm going to take this under advisement, do some research, and circle back on that. So, hopefully, Judge Boreski will do that, and and again, I really, really, really hope that these witnesses will get their act together a little bit more. I have a little more patience with civilians, but for people who, like, this was their job, they were already really bad at their job, there were severe consequences for them being so bad at their job, they need to be good at their job right now. and stop playing to the crowd. But anyway, okay. On that note, have a wonderful night, and we'll talk soon.